The air hung thick and cold over the remote Bavarian farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. The name itself meant something unsettling. Hinter meaning behind or remote, and Kaifeck being a local place name. It stood in utter isolation, surrounded by dense forest and open fields, 2 kilometers from the nearest village, Grubshofen. This isolation, which the Gruber family likely sought for privacy or economic independence, was the very thing that made the tragedy that unfolded there on March 31st, 1922, so utterly chilling. The crime was not witnessed, the screams were not heard, and the perpetrator was never caught. The victims were the 6 inhabitants of the farm: Andreas Gruber, 63, the patriarch; Kazilia Gruber, 72, his wife; Victoria Gabriel, 35, their widowed daughter; Kazilia Gabriel, 7, Victoria's daughter and Andreas's granddaughter; Josef Gruber, 2, Victoria's son and Andreas's grandson; and Maria Baumgartner, 44, the new maid. The true terror of Hinterkaifeck lies not just in the brutality of the crime, but in the unnerving events that led up to it, events that suggested the Gruber family was living under an intense, unacknowledged threat. The Gruber family was known to be strange, insular, and shadowed by scandal. It was an incestuous household. Andreas Gruber was widely believed to be the father of his daughter Victoria's first child, the 7-year-old Kazilia. Victoria's husband had died in the trenches of World War I, and she lived at the farm with her 2 children. The family was wealthy by local standards, owning a productive farm, but they were deeply unpopular in the village due to their secretive nature and the scandal surrounding their younger daughter, Victoria. In the weeks leading up to the murders, a series of deeply unsettling incidents began to erode the family's sense of security. Weeks before the murders, Andreas Gruber discovered a set of footprints in the fresh snow leading directly from the edge of the forest to the farmhouse door. Crucially, there were no footprints leading away. He searched the farm and the surroundings but found no one, yet the unnerving evidence suggested someone had walked right up to their doorstep, disappeared inside, or vanished in thin air. The family also reported hearing strange noises coming from the attic, like someone constantly moving around or working. When Andreas went up to investigate, he found nothing. He dismissed the noises to his wife and daughter, but the sounds persisted. Just days before the crime, the family discovered that the house key was missing. They had to break down a tool shed door to retrieve a spare. Additionally, Andreas found a strange newspaper on the farm that he had never bought. It simply appeared, though its delivery would have required the carrier to cross a long field, leaving tracks in the mud, which were absent. These incidents led Andreas to believe the farm was under surveillance. He confided in a neighbor, farmer Lorenz Schlittenbauer, that he felt someone was watching them, perhaps even living inside the house. Yet, due to his pride and stubborn nature, he refused to report these concerns to the police. Finally, there was the arrival of the new maid, Maria Baumgartner. The previous maid had left suddenly only 6 months prior, claiming she could no longer stand the atmosphere at the farm. Maria arrived on the afternoon of March 31st, 1922. She would be dead by that evening. The exact timeline of the attack is pieced together only through inference and medical examination. Investigators believe the murders took place on the evening of March 31st, likely after the family had finished dinner and before they went to bed. The attacker used a mattock, a heavy tool similar to a pickaxe used for digging and gardening, found in the farm's tool shed. All 6 victims were struck multiple times in the head with savage, crushing force. The killer possessed an unnerving intimacy with the farm's layout and the family's habits. The prevailing theory, based on the location of the bodies, is that the killer lured or intercepted the 4 adult family members first. Andreas, Kazilia, Sr., Victoria, and the maid Maria were all found crammed into the barn and stable area, just outside the main residence. They were killed one by one, likely as they entered the barn or were heading in to feed the livestock. This suggests the killer struck the adults first, possibly to prevent a mass alarm The two children, 7-year-old Kazilia Gabrielle and 2-year-old Josef Gruber, were killed last, inside the house in their separate sleeping chambers. The brutality against the young Kazilia was particularly heinous, indicating a killer either overcome with rage or ensuring absolute silence. The fact that the small Josef was killed inside, alone, also suggests the killer may have spent time in the house after silencing the adults. The meticulous nature of the killings, ensuring all 6 were dead before proceeding, rules out a spontaneous crime of passion. The crime was deliberate, organized, and executed with cold precision. The most astonishing part of the Hinterkaifeck story is not the murders themselves, but the fact that the bodies lay undiscovered for 4 full days. Saturday, April 1st. A coffee salesman, Hans Szurawski, arrived at Hinterkaifeck to take an order. He knocked on the door and windows, but received no answer. He saw no one and, believing the family was busy, left. Sunday, April 2nd. The family failed to show up at church, which was highly unusual for the deeply religious Kazilia Gruber. Monday, April 3rd. Kazilia Gabriel, the 7-year-old, failed to attend school. The teacher noticed her absence, but assumed the bad weather was the cause. Tuesday, April 4th. The first real alarm was raised. Albert Hoffner, a local mechanic, arrived at the farm to repair an engine. He waited for over an hour, seeing no one. He heard the livestock, notably the cattle, but sensed something was terribly wrong. He reported his concerns to the village. A small search party was formed that afternoon, consisting of Hoffner, Grobschofen's mayor, and Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the neighbor Andreas had confided in about the surveillance, who also had an interest in the farm as the likely biological father of little Josef. Upon entering the farm, the search party made the horrifying discovery. The door to the barn was mysteriously locked from the outside. They broke it open and found the 4 adults piled on the floor, the maid, Maria, at the bottom, followed by Andreas, Kazilia, Sr., and Victoria, all barely recognizable. The party then entered the house and found the children. The horror was complete. The local police and investigators from Munich descended on Hinterkaifeck, but the investigation was plagued by severe errors from the start, compounded by the time lapse. In the initial chaos, dozens of curious villagers and investigators trampled the farm, destroying vital forensic evidence. Furthermore, the crime weapon, the mattock, was simply cleaned and later returned to the farm and stored with the evidence. What the investigators discovered inside the house made the case unique and deeply disturbing. It was determined that the killer had lived in the house for at least 3 days after the murders. Someone had fed the cattle. Someone had eaten food, mainly bread and cured meat, from the kitchen pantry. The beds had been slept in. A neighbor, sent to the farm a few days after the discovery, reported seeing smoke coming from the chimney. In the parlor, a piece of roast was found on the table, indicating a meal had been abruptly interrupted or prepared by the killer. This chilling detail transformed the crime from a simple robbery gone wrong into something far more sinister. An attack motivated by something other than money, followed by an inexplicable period of cohabitation with the dead. Robbery was quickly ruled out. A large sum of money from the sale of a harvest was found hidden in the floorboards, and jewelry was left untouched. The killer took only small, almost symbolic items, such as a watch and a set of house keys. Over the following decades, Bavarian police interviewed over 100 people about the case. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the neighbor, was the prime suspect for decades, largely due to his complicated relationship with Victoria and his presence at the discovery. He was interrogated multiple times, but always provided a solid alibi. Other suspects included local criminals and even rejected suitors of the previous maid, but no hard evidence ever linked anyone to the atrocity. The deeper the police dug, the more confusing the motive became. The facts of the case simply did not fit any conventional motive. The crime was highly organized and targeted, but the lack of theft ruled out a professional bandit. The unseen presence, the footprints leading to the house but not away, the noises in the attic, and the presence of the newspaper all pointed to someone who was either living on the property for some time or was an outsider who stalked the farm meticulously. The killer used a farm tool, the mattock, from the shed, suggesting an opportunity by an assailant already on the property rather than a pre-planned attack. The post-mortem actions, the time spent tending the cattle and eating meals in the house after the murder, is perhaps the most disturbing clue. It suggests the killer was either exhausted and needed a refuge, or that they were comfortable enough in the house, perhaps a relative or someone intimately familiar with the family's routine. In 1955, the case was officially closed by the police as unsolvable. Although a modern reinvestigation in 2007 used profiling techniques, concluding the likely scenario was a lone perpetrator who lived on the farm and was motivated by rage or a sexual motive. They could not reveal the identity of the killer, as all key suspects were deceased. Today, the Hinterkaifeck farm is gone. It was torn down in 1923, a year after the murders, as the local people feared the dark history attached to the land. A small cross stands near the site, marking the spot of one of Germany's most chilling and intractable true crime mysteries. The story of the Gruber family remains a profound tragedy, sealed by utter isolation. The 6 people who died at Hinterkaifeck were not killed by a random passerby. They were killed by someone who watched them, waited for them, and was perhaps living right above their heads in the cold, dark silence of the attic. The silence of the remote farm was not broken until 4 days later, by which time the killer had already melted back into the shadows of the forest, never to be identified. The axe blades of the mattock delivered the finality, but the true motive remains buried forever beneath the Bavarian soil.